you would be like, action. Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, I'm Diane Traversi, I'm the Dean of Enrollment Services, and I'm going to give you a presentation on FERPA today. Other than what you can see up there, do any of you know more about FERPA? Because now you know what FERPA stands for, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And it is a law that was put into effect in 1974. It's had several updates and different iterations. The most massive overhaul was 4 years ago. 4 years ago. And that update was 89 pages long. And some substantial changes that needed to be made, especially now with the use of technology. Things really needed to be redefined and updated and so forth. And actually that's when I got really involved in FERPA regulations. In my former position, I was the FERPA compliance officer for that college. And, you know, I kind of just maintained the status quo. But then when the update came out, I was asked to give an update training at our statewide convention. And so I spent quite a good part of a year doing the research and actually completely rewriting the policy for that district and then do the training. So it's really a geeky thing to be really involved at, but I do have a really geeky name now, which is the FERPA Queen. All over the state, they know me as the FERPA Queen. So I'm here today to bring you up to speed and illuminate some things for you, and hopefully, since there's so many of you here, you'll all tell 2 people, and they'll all tell 2 people. Joking aside, it is a good, once your awareness is heightened about it, it is a good thing to share with your colleagues if you happen to see or notice something that maybe might have us out of compliance, because we're all here to protect each other and also protect the students. So. What I can first tell you about FERPA is, do any of you know about HIPAA? That's the act that protects a patient's privacy, so it's very much the same thing. In fact, I used to work in the medical and dental profession, and I learned HIPAA first. So it's easy to translate, and people, we know about that one more because you always have to sign the forms when you're in a doctor's office. Everybody's not as aware of it at an educational institution, but we should be, so I'm going to get you started on that path. So the question comes up, wow. Are you adequately protecting your students and their privacy? It really is our responsibility. We are the keeper of a great deal of personally identifiable information, which it's identity information that can be stolen, and we don't want to be the one who's putting the students' records at risk. But also, they have the right to privacy for what their academic record says, from their parents, their spouses, their doctor, anyone like that. It's our responsibility to keep that protected. So what is FERPA, and why do we have to adhere to its regulations? The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, known as the Buckley Amendment, is the primary law that protects a student's confidentiality. The Department of Education can notice a cease of any noncompliance and could ultimately withhold federal funds if we were found to be guilty of something that a student brought up charges on. And most importantly, our students depend on us to keep their information confidential, prevent identity theft, and protect their privacy. So whose records are protected under FERPA? It's important to remember that FERPA protects both current and former students. So even after the students exit the institution, it's our responsibility and duty to protect those records and the information that's in them up until their death. Any record created during a student's time at your institution or any institution is considered their educational record and is FERPA protected. And we'll get into more about details about what constitutes a record. FERPA rights generally begin when the student is admitted to the institution. However, each institution has the right to define this. Most community colleges do at the time of admission, because it's assumed that all students who fill out an application for admission are going to be students here, and that admissions application is full of personally identifiable information. So even if they decide not to come here, Um, we still have to protect those. Universities, if they turn down an admission, they can just shred the documents and get rid of it. So it's a little bit different at a bigger institution. So the student's rights are defined as the following. A student has a right to inspect and review any of their education records within a reasonable time frame, but no later than 45 days after their initial request. They have the right to seek to have their education records amended, and they have the right to control the disclosure of their education records to any third party. Now that's the part that we focus on the most, is protecting their records, but it is important to remember that FERPA also gives them the right to examine their record and seek to have it changed if they feel that's necessary. And a student at any time has the right to address any privacy-related complaints. So the definition of an education record is anything that's related directly to a student, maintained by the institution or a staff member, and kept in any format. This is really key when you think about how much we use technology now, computers, smartphones, screens. Anytime that information is visible or accessible, it is considered an education record. So formal and informal documents, communications, computer data, computer screens, paper files, nearly every piece of student-related information, regardless of its location or the medium of its presentation, is considered to be part of a student's education record. So let's get right to the meat of it. In classrooms, to avoid FERPA violations, do not ever post grades using their SSN. Everybody's pretty much out of the habit of using SSNs. That's pretty prevalent everywhere. But you also cannot use their new number or personally identifiable data. So the bottom line is the only way students should be accessing their grade is through their MyCom student portal. They shouldn't be posted visibly anyway, in any way, shape, or form. You should never link a student's name with his or her new number or SSN in any public manner. Never leave graded tests or graded coursework of any kind in a stack for pickup. So I happened to see this one when I was out this last semester doing SESI surveys in a class, and so I had my survey giver hat on and had to hold myself back when I saw the instructor put out the stack of exams and sort of fan them across the table and said, okay, everybody just come up and, you know, in between and get your papers, as they're rifling through each other's and looking at others, and I'm like, ah! But it happens all the time. It's a very common way for instructors to distribute their coursework, but it can't be. You can't circulate a printed class list with names, new number, or grades as an attendance roster. So a lot of large lecture classes, sometimes theater arts where people are coming and going, they'll do it that way. They'll just leave it like a sign-up sheet and check it. You can do it once. So you can print a list out once, but you should never have the new number with just their name, and they can check it. But the minute you use that a second day and put the checks again, that constitutes an education record because it's the attendance record. So there's ways around all of it. And if you ever have any questions that in a special situation, you can always email me or just give me a call and I can help you work through it. There really isn't any situation that you can't figure out a way, because it's what you have to do. It's the right thing.
Can you have students just sign in on a sheet?
You can, but you can't use that again then.
Gotcha.
Yes. This is for A&R offices specifically, but a lot of it applies to other departments. Do not discuss a student or any of their personally identifiable information with anyone over the telephone except the student themselves. And that's only after they've positively identified themselves after you ask a series of questions. So much like when you call a bank and you have a password, you ask, you know, some secret words. It's probably the one that staff, instructors fall into the easiest, because you get the phone call and, you know, even if you remember I'm not supposed to tell anything, you get engaged in the conversation pretty soon. The horse is out of the barn and you're talking about stuff you shouldn't be. Plus, how do you know it's the student themselves that you're talking to? Never assist anyone in finding a student on campus other than an eligible institutional employee. So in other words, if say a gentleman comes to class and says, I'm looking for my wife, we had an emergency and I have to find her. restraining order that we, might not know about. Actually, anything I'm telling you, I can give you a case story where it's happened. Somebody comes in and it turns out, there was a restraining order. Now he knows where his wife is. Do not provide anyone with a list of students enrolled in classes for any commercial purpose. So just an example of this, we had an art instructor who was contacted by a gallery and wanted a list of recently graduated students with an art major. And she's like, oh, this is such a great opportunity. And she just, the whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel, phone numbers, everything. Not good. You can ask them for the information and you can distribute it to them through your own portal, but can't get that information. Do not discuss the progress of any student with anyone, including the parents. We'll talk about parents. Other than the student, without the student's consent. Student consent is very specific, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's not a free-for-all like, oh, my daughter said I can talk to whoever, or I'll talk about that. There's a lot of different ways parents coerce their kids to sign. And the student doesn't really know what they're giving away. And never provide anyone with the student's schedule. Again, if they're trying to find something, campus police is the best. So inevitable phone calls. When you're taking an incoming phone call from a student, first direct the student to his or her portal to seek the information they need. This is really what we want our students to do all the time. If they are an active student here, that's the best place. Any information that they are going to ask you over the phone, they should be able to get through their portal. So that's how I train our staff, is to say, you can get that information in your portal, log on, etc., help them with that. If they've forgotten their password, they can help them with that, and so forth. If they still require assistance, always ask the following questions. And this is just an example. Different departments can come up with different ones, but this is what we use because we have access to this information, and it's it's kind of a combination of questions that only the student could be able to answer. A parent can kind of answer one or two of them. Really involved parents can answer all of them better than the student himself. But what we ask is, what is your room number? And then always say, am I speaking to the student personally right now? Then we ask for the personal email address that they provided to the college. And then just as kind of an off one, we say, actually my staff came up with this one. What's your favorite class that you've taken at COM? And it can't just be math or English, it has to be something specific. Because that's honestly, it's mostly parents who are trying to get the information. And even when they know their child better than they know themselves, they usually can't answer that one. It's a little bit of a trigger. So, but my advice to staff is, when in doubt, don't give it out. That's our mantra. People are so quick to answer a question when somebody gets a little bit intimidating. And I always remind them, you don't have to. If you feel uncomfortable about it, say, let me take your name and we'll call you back at the number we have on your student record. Not just the number that they give you. It just gives you, 5-10 minutes to just, okay, can I answer this question? Can I give this out? The best advice I can ever give anyone, and I do it myself, is please don't tell me your name or your student's name. And I'll answer every question I can of a general nature. Most of the time you can answer anything that they need to know if you phrase it that way. But as soon as you have taken that student's name, now you've acknowledged that they're a student here, and that's a violation too. So if a student has opted out of directory information and they call, say a parent calls and says, what's my son's schedule? You can't even say, oh, we can't talk to you because he's opted out of student information. Right there, you're acknowledging that the student is a student, and that's violated their privacy as well. So be very careful. So, should even say suggested. This is actually required in enrollment services. Suggested ways to safeguard student records. We require a photo ID every time in order to access a student file, even if we know the student. And the reason we do that is it's, once you kind of let that down and go, oh, I know you, I don't have to do it, there's somebody else standing behind them in line, and you're going to ask them for that person's photo ID, or the student gets in the habit of not being asked for it, and then when someone does, they get offended, or they don't keep it with them. It's really not uncommon nowadays. If you're a Kaiser member, wherever you go to Kaiser, you have to flip that ID out everywhere you go. So it's taken a little bit of doing about it now. But it's the best way to do it. I mean, everybody pretty much has a photo ID. If not a driver's license, they have something that they can show, or a student body card. Should always password protect your computer that you store student records in. When you finish a computer task involving student data, you should exit all files, sign off all applications, and close all application windows. So remember when I told you that in any medium, it constitutes a file. So if you have a computer screen up with the student's information there, and then you walk away to go to the bathroom or do something else, now that's exposed information, so that should be shut down. Yeah, this is another one that still happens a lot. I've even been tempted to do it a few times. But you should only use your assigned computer accounts and do not share it with other individuals. You are solely responsible for all actions that are taken using your computer. So one of the ways that I see it happens a lot is we have a lot of work study students or student employees, and they may not have all the rights and permissions that you want them to have so that you can have them do the job you need them to do. And at their level, they shouldn't have that access. So right there, that kind of stops you like, well, should I really be giving the person access if I can't get it for them themselves? But what happens is, oh, here, I'll just log myself on, and then I want you to do this, this, and this. I have to remember they have access to everything once they sit down at that computer and do it. And if anything's changed on the record, whoever owns the computer would be held responsible for it. Even if there was a camera on the person and you could see it wasn't them, you're doling out information for that. I think that's what happened at DVC several years ago, and grades were actually being changed by students. They had kind of a little ring going and money making and all good things. So the regulations have really clamped down. Now any admissions and records office is only allowed to have 5 certified people to change grades. But again, if that person who has the permission leaves it open for someone else, then I'm sure liability will. Respond only to inquiries that you're authorized to field, even if you have access to the information that's being sought. So if someone is like, oh, I know someone who works there, and I'll just ask them because they can get it. If it's not directly in your line of responsibility and you followed all the other regulations, you should not be answering it, even if you have access to it. Just say that's not in my area. And then the biggest one I can tell you is shred. Oh my gosh, when we were trying to move into get everything unpacked, the amount of shred is, I think we could probably build a small city with the amount of paper we have there. But according to records retention, there are only certain things that you have to keep forever. And we're trying to move towards a scanning imaging system here. But if it's past its 3-year or even the 1 year, don't just throw it away, shred it, use the service. I recommend just every person having a personal one at their desk and doing it every day. So do we have an obligation to release directory information? I think that's the most important thing to remember, that we aren't obligated to release it to anyone. We have the right to make the decision. There are certain things, a subpoena, something like that. But everybody's so quick to give it out because someone says they need it urgently. And the thing to remember is you don't need to. Again, when in doubt, don't give it out. So parental rights, do they have any? Should they have any? Yes, in some cases they do. This is one that we don't think about. Well, I do now because of financial aid, but parents have the right to expect that the information such as their own financial records and related financial information will be held confidential. These cannot be released to the student or others without the parent's authorization. So, probably wouldn't apply to any of you, but definitely in the financial aid office where they're submitting tax returns, financial statements, all that kind of thing. The parent has the right to expect that we won't release that information to their child, even though it's related to their financial aid application. Parents' access to information from their children's educational record is carefully restricted unless the student provides prior written consent for data release to the parent. Otherwise, the the only information that can be released to parents is the directory information, provided the student has not opted out of its release. First, what's important about prior written consent is it's not a matter of when a student is standing there with a parent and say, you know, my mom wants to know my grades, and so I give permission. That's not how it goes. What I do, and I encourage everyone to do, is to take the student in the office. I have a pre-printed FERPA information for parents, and I give it to the parent and say, you know, you can just sit here and read this for a minute. I'm just going to have a quick conference with your son or daughter, which they sometimes object to. But really, I advise the student what they're giving what permission for, because they're kind of giving it away at that point, and I want them to understand they don't have to, and that they can limit what it is. So I tell the student, I just want you to know it's within your rights to keep everything private, even from your parent. And by the way, regardless of the age of the student, FERPA rights are transferred to a student at the time they're admitted to college, even if they're a minor. So we have a lot of high school concurrent enrollment students, and those parents are very used to being very involved with their child's life and their education, and they have to surrender those rights at this point. They sign it. It's on every application, but they usually haven't read it. It's every form.
Can you go over that again?
Sure. Which part?
The parents, even though the student is under 18?
The students have a right to privacy. Their parents are not allowed to have access to their records the way they are in the K-12 system. That's usually a surprise for everyone. In fact, most of the time parents will say, well, they're a minor, you have to tell me. And then I explain it. And then they get really upset, and then I explain it again. So it's difficult for them. I mean, usually whenever I've gone out and talked to parent groups, I let them know that in their own mind, I think they think, oh, that's different, I'll be able to get it. Now, we do share educational information, such as their grades and that sort of thing with the high school, so they can access it through the high school if it's chosen to share. But just because you have an underage minor in your class, the parent still can't call you and say, is my son coming to class, what are the grades like, any of that kind of stuff. That's probably the hardest one to get around, because parents are very persistent. But again, if you say, I can answer questions of a general nature, don't tell me your student, your son or daughter's name, I probably already told you anyway, but you can't say, yeah, they're doing great, or they're slacking in class, or
So that's me as an instructor.
anybody, instructor, staff member, janitor, anybody, everybody in the institution has to maintain the privacy of that student. So the prior written consent is not a form, what everybody would like to have, where they can just shove it in front of their son or daughter and have them sign it. It has to be a statement that the student has written out and said, I give permission for my parent, blah, blah, blah's name, to speak with, and then they can say, everybody or anyone on campus related to anything, if that's what the student wants to, they can say, to my final grades only during this year. It should be a definitive note that says exactly what can be discussed. And that's what I tell the student. I said, when you're doing this, it's great that you want to share this information with your parent, but you need to be very clear about what you're okay with sharing. Otherwise, anything can be shared. And you're an adult now that you're coming to college, unless they're a minor, but you're going to be treated as a college student here, and there's rights and responsibilities that come with that, and this is one of them. So
we have a form in DSPS that you check that, they can share medical information. Is that the check?
is that for minors or anybody?
No, for anybody.
Yeah, I would advise against it. Mostly because something with a checkbox like that would never hold up in court. I know it's a little bit different in DSPS, and we could talk about that offline if you want. I know I worked on some different documents for DSPS at my last district for that reason. So I know there's a little bit different there, so we have to talk to you about that. Okay, when an institution may allow access to a child's education down to, if the student is a dependent for federal income tax purposes, that gives the student the right to it, but it's not carte blanche. They can't just say, I pay his bills, or I claim him on my taxes, I can do this. You actually have to have proof, and you still have to have the student's consent and all that. If the disclosure is in connection with a health or safety emergency, that's, as defined by section 99, that's that huge document that I told you about. So, for instance, if there was an earthquake, or a natural disaster, something like that, or a shooting or something, that's an occasion where you could suspend FERPA, and you could let a parent know, or other people know that the students are here and they're safe, or that kind of thing. But the only one who can declare that emergency is the police. You can't say, oh, this is an emergency, They don't have a babysitter tonight. Go find my daughter, I need her to babysit. So you can't make up your own emergency. So you have an emergency. For post-secondary students, if the student has violated any federal, state, or local law, rule, or policy regarding the use or possession of alcohol or controlled substance. So if it's that supersedes FERPA and GCHAP. You have to notify a parent that their kid is passed out. So some case studies. This part's a little bit more fun, and then we can ask some questions. So the hypothetical is Stephanie, student attends your college. Her father is a faculty member there and wants to find out how Stephanie is doing in school. So he calls the A&R office to find out. How should the office respond?
Yeah, information.
He's a really friendly faculty member, though. Everybody loves him. You never had that? We get that all the time. Giving somebody a little neck massage. Hey, how's it going? So the answer is, the father does not have a legitimate need to know Stephanie's record, even though he is on the faculty. You need to get a signed consent form from Stephanie, or he would need to prove financial dependency via an official uncorrected tax return. So that tax return, the reason, well, one of the things to note there is that in a situation with divorced parents, usually only one of them gets to claim the child, so you have to ask for it. Again, violation of privacy. Can you guys think of any exceptions to when we can talk to your friend or faculty? That's right. What about if it's a minor child? The super friendly guy who everyone loves. Or what if Stephanie is a DSPS student? So, no exceptions for the minor child unless there's a written consent. Super friendly guy, no. DSPS student, there are some differences there, like we talked about. We can go over. Okay, so Frank's parents are divorced. By agreement, his mother claims him as a dependent on her annual tax returns, but his father is required to pay the college tuition. Frank and his mother have both refused to tell Frank's father anything about his academic progress at college. Frank's father turns to the institution for help, providing receipts of tuition payments as documentation of his rights. Can the institution do anything? No, because Frank's mother is the only one who can provide evidence of tax return. The father may need to resort to court action to gain access to the education information. Further, if Frank has opted out of the release of directory information, no response may be given to any inquiry at all. Case study number 3. The DSPS office calls your A&R department and requests a list of students that includes their full SSN because they need to upload them to a filer program that only accepts SSN. Can you provide such a list? No. No. High-risk records such as SSNs or other information that can be used for identity theft should generally receive greater or more immediate protection than medium or low-risk records. The risk outweighs the possible legitimate educational interest, as the exposure to many other individuals whose hands or eyes they may land poses a high risk of identity theft. So sometimes there really is a need to transmit a file like that. And there are ways to do that with the help of IT. You can do a password-protected, encrypted file, something like that, that can only be used once for a period of time. So there's ways to transfer information legitimately without putting the students at risk. But this is my turn in the presentation to tell you about what really happened in my last district and how really awful it can get really, really quick. And this was a case of our nursing program where they had, on the average, 300 to 500 students apply for the nursing program every year. This year, that I'm speaking of, they had 464 applicants. And so when the department secretary or administrative assistant was taking in the information, she was building an Excel file and putting in the student's name and address and phone number and email address and GPA and social security number and every other piece of personally identifiable information, probably blood type for all I know, and their TB status or whatever. So, built this great big file to keep track of these 464 students, obviously. And out of that, they chose their pool of 24 students that would be incoming for the next year. So, you know, great little Excel file. She manipulated it so the 24 chosen were on the, brought up to the front. First page of the Excel file, here it is. So she decided to share all the information with all the faculty and adjunct faculty that were in the program. Here's who's been accepted. Here's your students for next year. Everything you need to know to contact them, etc. And sent it off. So all the faculty get it. Okay, all right. One adjunct faculty who taught one class every week. I don't know, it wasn't distance ed, but like nobody ever saw her. I think she like worked at night or something like that. She got it. She thought, oh, this is so great, you know. So she took it and she sent an email to all the students on the list and included the Excel spreadsheet so they could all see who their classmates were. Okay, that's bad if it was just the 24 students. It would be bad if you sent it for 12 students. But what she didn't know is that there was page after page after page on the Excel file of all 464 students. So she sent it out. Well, the very next morning, 3 of the nursing students are like, came in, freaked out, you know, like, this instructor sent all of this. Well, so they realized what happened. And the ones who had opened it, I think they retracted the email. They took the 9 people who had opened it, brought them into their computer lab and had them delete the file. So they're like, we're good. And I said, we're good. I think we need to talk to legal. Well, it turned out that everybody who received the email, so there were 24 of them, all of those students had to bring their computer to campus and have their computer scrubbed. We had one individual who wouldn't allow that to happen. And we had to notify all 464 students that their records were exposed, and we had to pay for credit protection for all of them for the next 5 years. Yeah, just because the adjunct faculty wanted to reduce the cost to everybody. So, it can happen, like, you know, so when you're sending something and you're thinking, I'm sending to people who know better, but you know, then they told 2 friends, and then they told 2 friends, and then they told 464 people all their right information. So it happens, and I can't even tell, that probably took, well, a year to kind of clear the panic about it. But even then afterwards, you know, anytime anybody ever of those 464 people had a problem, you know, came back to haunt you, you know, you're paying for this and it didn't help. So, not to mention the people who have their computers scrubbed, because when a computer's scrubbed, it puts everything at risk that's there. You're not necessarily going to get it back clean like you just rinsed it with the hose. So. Sue's student works in the A&R office and has an axe to grind with her ex-boyfriend, Ken, so she tells his buddies that he's on academic probation and is in danger of being dismissed. She viewed Ken's grades while working in the registrar's office with her lookout privileges. One of his buddies tells his parents, who then tells Ken's parents. His parents cut off his allowance. Obviously, Ken's very upset and now wants to sue the college for breach of privacy. Can Ken's attorney use FERPA to determine if any disciplinary action can be taken by the college against Sue? Obviously, Sue should have looked at, should have not released the information. I need to fix that typo. If the office knows she did so, the institution should take disciplinary action. her position as a student. Sue's employment records are education records. If it's a public institution rather than a private, the college could still be held accountable. However, if Sue was a regular employee, then FERPA would not apply, and the employee as well as the college could be subject to legal action. So it's a little complicated when you're having a student employee working in your area, because they're a student first and then they're an employee, so we still have to protect their rights as a student even though they're an employee. In any case, the college is not in a good place.
So I actually have a question that comes up as a result of student employees. I've never personally had a student as a TA, but I've had students that asked for that kind of responsibility. So would that be in violation? It seems to me that it would potentially be in violation of FERPA to have, even though it was a past student, as a TA grading papers, because those are now student records.
Right. Yeah, you shouldn't have students grading.
Understand.
So this is one of my general presentations, so we'll just ignore that. But I'm the one who's responsible. We don't have a really strong policy. I'm working on doing that, but kind of in conjunction with John Aldridge and Dr. Kuhn, what we decided was to do some widespread education first before you just slap in a policy. So I'm working on that. So the bottom line is don't disclose the information. I mean, that's the best thing I can tell you is not to disclose information, or at least to take a deep breath and think about it before you do it. The handout that I gave you, this is kind of the best cheat sheet I could come up with that I've kind of tweaked over the years. But this is really what a student's rights are as far as FERPA goes. District students have the right to expect that, well, I'm not going to read it all to you, but I would say whenever you're in doubt, refer to this and see if there's something that you're doing there that you might want to question about. But there's one other case study that I had. This is again my former district. I've been here long enough to know it very many here. Although I did walk into Castleman. I think it was my first week here. I was on the 3rd floor, and we were looking for something, and I walked by, and there was this big like mail bin with all these blue books, the essay book, all graded. And just, but we had an incident with a student who actually brought suit against my former college. He was a firefighter. He was in the firefighter academy, and there was a student worker who worked at the facility, and she happened to know this guy, and I guess he was their former neighbor or something. And so she went home and told her dad, "Oh, guess what? I saw so-and-so's son. He was in the firefighting academy," and she's talked all about it. It's so great, blah blah blah. So the father goes to breakfast sometime after that, and walks into the restaurant and sees the kid, and who's not a kid anymore. And he said, "Hey, how are you? I heard you're in the firefighter academy. My daughter works there," and sitting the whole thing, and the man is just mortified. And he's like, "Well, who's this?" Well, it was his wife and kid. Turns out that the kid had been estranged from his father and his family, and didn't want him to know he was married or had kids or where he was or anything about him. So this guy was crazy, over the top, upset. I mean, I think I probably dealt with him for about 6 months when he decided, what he was going to do. Sometimes it's something as simple as, this girl is like, "Oh, my neighbor's son." The responsibility that we all have to not just talk idly about, the students or who we knew or what we know about them is pretty big. Do you guys have any situations that you've come up against that, now looking back, you would think, what about that one?
I do.
Okay, what?
As a baseball, I know it's going to be a question, as a baseball coach, I'm having our players recruited by colleges and college coaches. So they ask for transcripts, unofficial transcripts of the students, and I've sent them without consent because, hoping that a scholarship ends up from this. So what would be the step for them to get that
You need-
unofficial transcript to the college?
You would need to ask the student's permission.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they can ask the student themselves, but if they're going through you for recruiting to see who's
Yeah.
good potential, you should have a form ready to sign for the
Okay.
students, yeah, to make sure.
And should that form be for every time or one time specific to say beginning? Because I'm sending, there's multiple schools. This past year I got recruited, I probably was contacted by 20 schools.
Well, that's a really good question. Let me ask you, can you ever think of a situation where a student would have objected, let's say if you sent it to UC Davis and then 30 other ones?
No,
No.
they want that process.
They do want it,
to begin,
okay.
yeah.
Then I would just develop the form and I can help you with
Okay.
the wording if you want to have it say that. But I would, at the very least, maybe put some date parameters on it or
Sure.
something, so it's not completely open-ended, so that, you know, God forbid a transcript ends
Yeah,
up
and
somewhere.
we should probably do that department-wide.
Absolutely. Matt's been to my FERPA training. I know he's texting.
And the other question I had was on grade checks. So students are bringing, we ask to, you know, from an academic standpoint, they need to pass a certain amount of units and have above a certain amount of GPA. So we ask them to do a grade check, bring it to their professors. I guess because they're doing that,
That's fine,
then we can
yeah.
then evaluate.
Right. If the
But then
student
we're
is
gonna
doing
have
it,
to shred.
that's fine, and we're exchanging information within the institution. That constitutes a legitimate educational interest, which is a term that's used in the FERPA policy. So if there's a legitimate reason to exchange information with others in the institution, it's fine. It's not okay if, I'll give you an example. Let's say in the nursing program, that's a cohort of students, and their success and progress in each class depends on the program as a whole. So that faculty could collaborate with other instructors, right? So they can say, I need to go talk to the clinical instructor and find out, you know, is she attending all of her clinical hours because she's not attending my class or something like that. That's a legitimate educational interest because it's how the student is as a whole. What's not appropriate is, say, you went and asked one of your team members' math teacher how he's doing. Unless you have the student's permission, yeah. So in cohort situations, that would make sense, but like it would be cool if you were sitting in the faculty lounge and said, oh, you know, hey, my son's best friend is in your math class, how's he doing? It's not a legitimate educational interest, yeah. Any other situations or challenges that you have that come up?
Well, there's one thing that I started with one of the children, students from, one of the students from, who's in the DSPS, she wanted to take a class at night, at 6:30, 9:30, and then she was gonna catch whistle stop on the corner in the dark, and so I was like, maybe we could get you an escort. Is there any problem there? We saying this person is this person and she wants to, we want to get her an escort if we can. Is there any problems?
I don't think so, no. I mean, that's providing assistance, and I don't think that's really giving any specific information. I mean, once a student is here on campus and there's another person, it's pretty obvious that the student is a student here on the campus.
Yeah.
So you're not disclosing information that would harm the student. Yeah.
Now, I have a whole bunch of old records in the office, because I've been there a year. It's full of social security numbers and new numbers on the same page.
Okay.
We've done comments. Should I find myself blocking the cabinet and put it in
Yes,
there?
absolutely. Anytime there's personally identifiable information on a document, it should be in a lock cabinet. In fact, I'm not sure about your situation, but best case scenario is in a locked cabinet behind a locked door. So it's not okay to just have it in a locked office.
How how far back do we have to keep them? I mean, there's some there from 2000.
What kind of documents are they?
They're contracts, they're agreements, because we do agreements where students, sometimes students come in and perform for us, or folks from outside are coming in and they'll have a different part.
Well, my first answer would be probably 7 years, but it's a little bit different than the records I'm used to. I'll find out for you.
HR records. For agreements for services.
Yeah, that's true.
Agreements for services, yeah, those are like HR records.
And, yeah, and I'm familiar with student records retention, but I'm not exactly sure what category that would fit in. I'm not sure if it would be eternal records or not.
I'd ask at HR.
That's a good idea. Ask HR.
And
Because I don't know that I would find it in my records retention manual. It's a little bit off, yeah, out of my scope. Okay, great, great. Any other?
I have a question about email addresses.
Mhm.
So I do a lot of emailing with my students. What I tend to do is do a blind copy to them and then send it to myself at my own address.
It's good practice.
But I tend to use my personal email address more than my school one because the program is better in order to. So when the semester is over, should I delete those email addresses? Is that something that's?
Well, I'm going to give you the company line first.
Okay.
Any email communication done with a student should be done through their MyCom portal. It should not be personal email address to personal email address.
Oh, wow.
That's the best protection.
Most of them, I have a hard time getting them to like forward their MyCom, and so most of them don't pay attention to MyCom.
I know. That's one of my missions while I'm here is to make that portal like a Facebook page, like something they can't live without.
Yeah.
You can live without it right now. It's not that great. I just said that on camera. Okay, that's what I actually have a group going called the PUG group, which is the portal user group, where we bring a rotation of students in to give us feedback on what they like, what they don't like, how we can improve it. I kind of just got it off the ground last year, but it lost traction completely during the summer because everybody leaves. But I'm working on that again. So that's definitely been one of my focuses. How can we get you to read it? Because I remember when I first logged on, I didn't even realize I had my com email. And I went in there and I had 484 messages.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, good thing it wasn't anything important, or maybe it was, I don't know. We can't figure out why, and this is, John and I both have been pressing the IT staff, why we can't get down to just having one email, and that students can use their own personal email as that email. Because who remembers it? How do you remember all those passwords? And,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, but it is the safest, securest way to do it, and I do understand why people don't use it. As far as deleting them, what I learned from that nursing experience is even when you delete something, it's never really gone. So I don't know what you'd be achieving by deleting them.
Okay.
Just, yeah. And you can do it if you want, but what do you think would be accomplished if you deleted them?
Well, I tend to send out notices, maybe even after a student is not in my class anymore, about performances and things.
You know what, then that is a good idea because you're not supposed to use their email address that you got while they're a student for other purposes.
Okay.
So yes, okay, see, good thing we talked that one through. Any surprises today? No? So what I can tell you is most of the time people won't jump forward and say, oh my, and I'm not saying that that's any of you, but they will be like, oh my God, I've been doing everything wrong. What I can tell you is I am the FERPA compliance officer, but I'm not the FERPA police. Nobody's going to get in trouble. If you think that you're doing something wrong and you want to do it different, I'm more than happy to work ways. There's no one I'm going to turn you into. You're not bad. You're not horrible. You won't get a FERPA ticket. Usually when this is a pretty small group, but usually when I give the presentation to the group, there's a lot of just like this, and then as soon as I leave the room, you hear everybody go, So I don't think that's going to happen here. But just to tell you, if you see something and you're concerned, yes.
So just to clarify, you said earlier, this is put into law in 1974, but COM personally hasn't adopted this as a policy? Is that what I heard?
Well, it's not really up to COM to adopt it as a policy. It's a law.
Yeah.
As an educational institution, we are supposed to do all this. Okay. So, but COM hasn't written its own policy about as how it applies here. But that doesn't relieve us of our responsibility to adhere to FERPA regulations.
This is something I plan on going over at my department meeting on Friday, because when you went over this at the department chairs meeting last semester, that was one of the people that I wasn't aware for the.
Yeah.
I know that I myself personally the way that I pass back work in my classroom, the way I've taken roll is all going against FERPA. And I know that other members in my department are doing the same thing. I've seen teachers post work, like for a student, tape it up
I
to
know.
the door outside their office. So I just want to clarify for them whether or not COM actually has this particular policy. Obviously it's law, we have to follow it. But you said something about general education and then next steps, like big, broad general education about FERPA.
So my next step in this year will to be continued training. I've kind of started up at certain levels, and like I'm more than happy to come to a department meeting if you want me to do that, or you can have them. This is going to be put on
YouTube.
YouTube. So you could actually show. This is a scintillating show to watch, but you can show it to them if you can't get me when you need me to be there or something like that. And then my next step after that will actually be to write an AP, a policy that will go in there so that it's easily accessible for everyone to see, and actually should eventually be part of the onboarding process for all new employees. So they get that training before they get access to a computer, anything like that. It's kind of like crop dusting right now. Just like, okay, just spreading it as much as I can, and hopefully it'll pick up speed. At my last district, when I did it, it took a good 2 years to kind of get everybody on board. And then there's still adjunct faculty who just never quite get the information, and you do the best that you can because you have to. It's the law. What happens is when I start telling people, they're like, "Are you telling me I have to do this, this, this?" I'm like, "I'm not telling you that you have to do anything. I'm telling you this is the law, and if you would like to follow it, which you should, just like you should drive the speed limit or don't steal things." That's how you can do it. I'm not going to come after you and hunt you down and do anything, but it's the right thing to do. We had and again, some of it's just really innocuous. I had a student who filed a petition, and I got the petition, and he said, I dropped this class on time. And I said, well, we have to have your attendance records from the instructor then. And so he contacted the instructor. So the instructor printed out the whole roster with the new numbers, full name, everybody's everything, copied it and sent it to the student to submit to this petition. I'm like, by the way, I don't think he's here. I invited him to come to the meeting today. When I emailed him to tell him he really can't do that, he'd come, but maybe I'm not going to be too much.
We have old learning disability testing files. My son going back, 15 years ago, that of course we didn't have new numbers then, we had Social Security numbers. Now we have scanned those, and they're saved on our department.
That's great. You should shred them then.
And they're shredded.
Okay, good.
So the only record is what's on the computer.
That's the way eventually we should be here, 100%. Is everything should be, we should never have any paper sitting out with any information on it like that.
So this is our department drive, so everybody in our department has access to that, and that's fine.
That's fantastic. In truth, though, they should all be FERPA trained so they know the responsibility that comes with having access to all that information. Yeah.
Well, I had a student this summer who was surprised that she failed the class. She's a little off. Anyway, but she was convinced she'd turned things in that she hadn't, and so I copied just her, I've got all my grades in an Excel. So I made a new Excel spreadsheet, so I wouldn't copy anybody else, and copied just her information and sent it to her. Can I do that?
You can, are you sure she was the, how did you send it to her?
To her email?
Electronically?
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as that's the email address that the request came from.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I still really caution people to be careful if, like that nursing thing, it's like, oh, I just sent the one thing, but actually.
Well, that's why I make sure I
But
get
yeah,
a
you can
whole-
send your own information, that's
Yeah.
fine. That's fine, yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I'll offer it again. I'm more than happy to do an in-person presentation when the semester slows down a little bit. I can't do it anytime in the next 3 or 4 weeks, but that's a good option. This will be available on YouTube. Or if you have one, you know, maybe a certain situation and you want the meeting tailored to that, I've given to all different types. I probably have 7 or 8 different versions of the PowerPoint. I forgot my flash drive at home today, so I'm using the only one I had at work today. But there are different ones, kind of depending on, you know, what it is. I know like in the drama department, there's, you know, when you're having huge cast calls and different situations call for different measures, and anything can be tweaked. So if you ever just want some advice or some guidance, or you have a document that you're gonna have people sign, you want to just run it by me, that's fine too. Okay. Spread the FERPA word. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Diane.
walk around just because we were